Hi folks, I have to apologise for the state I'm in. I'm a bit fatigued. I woke up this morning and I was absolutely exhausted. I hadn't done anything for a few days, building up to yesterday, Friday, the 15th of March. And then on Friday I was very active. I had Sam, who you saw in a previous video, my friend and colleague from Pride Southampton. We had a meeting with a close and dear long-term friend of mine from Unite the Union, and when I got up in the morning to have a bath and a shower and stuff, I did some exercise, and then after the meeting that was here in my flat, me and Sam went to her house. We did a bit of shopping in town, so it was a bit of walking about, and then we went to her house where her partner and other colleague from Pride, good friend Mabel, was, and we sat down and we produced two videos that I may have talked about in previous vlogs, one for Southampton Pride and one for Pride Southampton. And those videos are for Trans Day of Visibility, which is on the 31st of March this year, 2024. And we did the two videos for each organisation. And then I had a long walk with Mabel and Sam from the house afterwards, up a rather inclined hill. And when I got on the bus, my back was killing me. Got back to my flat, did some more exercise that I had done in the morning. I did another 10 minutes of strenuous exercise, so I did two lots that day. And then I had a shower and went to bed. And when I woke up this morning, I was absolutely plumb duckered out. I was exhausted. I ached. I'm knackered. I'm really fatigued and knackered. So apologies if I'm not very with it. I don't know how this will come across, but I'm a bit exhausted at the moment. I don't know if it was all the stuff I did yesterday or I'm just feeling a bit under the weather, but yeah. So the title of this video, as you've seen, is NHS and Blockers. And as some of you will be aware, the decision has come down on high from the NHS with probing from the Tory government in the UK to ban the use of puberty blockers for trans youth. So you're not going to get them but the NHS made a proviso, and that was that they was using them for trials, because their excuse was there wasn't enough evidence to suggest they were successful and weren't harming kids. Now, blockers, from what I've read on Pink News' site and stuff I already knew, have been used for trans youth since the 80s. But I believe blockers as a medication have been around since the 70s, used to treat precocious puberty, which is the onset of puberty at an early age, and some kids can't handle it. So they use puberty blockers to block the progress of the puberty, to give the time for the kid to adjust and get older, basically. Now, for me personally, I have a problem with blockers, not because I don't think they're an effective medicine. It's the way they are used up until this point in the UK. Now, blockers tended to be prescribed to trans youth by the time they were 16. Most trans youth in the country that were on blockers were about that age. They weren't given blockers before that age. Most of the NHS waited until the trans youth would reach 16, and then they would give them the blockers. In my opinion, that is fairly pointless. For me, it wouldn't have worked. I had a precocious puberty, but I wasn't on blockers. I started my puberty when I was 8-9. Very young for some people, and there is some anecdotal evidence that suggests puberty is onset earlier in generations, kids nowadays. There's reports that puberty is happening more prevalently in younger kids. So I had puberty when I was 8, 9. That's when I first started going through puberty. So if my parents had been a little bit more open-minded, and I had kind of realised that I was an egg that long ago, the NHS wouldn't have prescribed me blockers, because to their mind I was too young. I don't see the point of prescribing blockers to the vast majority of trans kids who are 16, because most of them are well into their puberty. So it's kind of too late. If you're going to give blockers, you should do it when the kid is coming into puberty, but that's all gone now. That's not going to happen. As I say, they cite evidence that suggests, well, they say there's not enough evidence. Blockers have been around since the 70s, 80s. We've got a wealth of evidence of how successful they are. But the government used the NHS to make the excuse that we don't have enough evidence, which is just nonsense. We do. We have over 40 years of research into how effective blockers are. We know how effective they are for cis kids. It's obvious that they would be successful for trans youth, but they're not going to prescribe them anymore. Only for trials, and only a select few kids will go on the trial. So the vast majority of trans youth in this country are going to go through their puberty. They're going to go through the trauma of puberty. Many of them are going to suffer severe amounts of gender dysphoria. It's not going to be pleasant for trans youth. I don't know what else to say other than this is just another stab at the trans community. And out of everything they've done outside of governing bodies, like in sport, this is a direct method by the government and the state, because the NHS is part of the state, to curtail trans youth, to keep them in the closet, to delay their transition until they're older, until they're adults. And most of us know who are trans, know we're trans, or have an understanding of our own gender by the time we're old. I first had a concept of gender and the idea of transitioning, not in so many words, not in that actual definition, but a concept of gender and the idea of being a different gender when I was 5. I remember my cis female friend, a girl who I was friends with at my primary school in Basingstoke, my first year at primary school in Basingstoke. She was explaining to me and a couple of my friends who were lads, boys, what a tomboy was. And I remember visibly, after she'd explained it, because she was a tomboy, and she was explaining what a tomboy was. She was a little bit older than us, only by a couple of years, but she was still in primary school, but she had a grasp of her identity. I remember thinking to myself, oh, I'd like to be that. I'd like to be a tomboy. That would be brilliant. I could be a girl, but I could still do the things that the boys do, and that appealed to me. And then a lot of things happened after that, and my eggshell formed, but it didn't crack, and it took me a few years to kind of realise what basically a trans woman was. So blockers are banned. Kids are going to have to go through the trauma of puberty. They're not going to enjoy it. I have a family member who I've mentioned before, and he won't now have the ability to go onto blockers, although he's in his mid-teens, he's out of school, but he won't get the ability to go on blockers. He will have to go through his puberty, and then when he's adult, if we still can, he will go on to T. But he's finding it difficult to get on to his transition because of the system in this country. It's gatekeeping. There's not enough funding. There's not enough staff. It's under resourced. It's got huge waiting lists for the clinics all around the country. And as some of you know from other videos, GIDS, the gender identity clinics for trans youth, are to be closed. The clinic in Tavistock was due to be closed, I think, last year, 2023, but because the two regional centres are just not being built or created, they've had to keep Tavistock open. But as far as I know, Tavistock's not taking any new referrals. So there's a lot of trans youth out there who aren't even being seen, and it's just horrific. So those are my opinions. That's what I think. I just think this is another attack by the state against the trans community, and as I say, it's the first real move by the government as it is now to restrict our access to healthcare. They're already trying to introduce policy guidance for schools against trans youth, and they're trying to change it in hospitals so trans women go onto men's wards and stuff like that. So the government has had a win here and we've had a loss. It's really bad, and as I say, I have a family member who is going through it, and this really affects them, and it's personal to me, as it is the whole community. All of us feel it. We all know what we were like when we were teenagers and when we were young. It's just appalling, and I don't know what else to say other than try and keep the faith. You know, this Tory government's possibly not long for governance. Another video I'm going to do is later on, maybe tomorrow or next week in the week, because today's the 16th of March 2024. I may do a video on the Labour Party's policies on trans rights, which are just appalling. But yeah, there we are. Blockers have been stopped. The government gets a win. We get a knockback. We have to rally now and do our best to overcome this, and hopefully maybe an incoming government will change the guidance. But yeah, it's a loss. It's not good. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you again soon, everybody. Goodbye.